Being short is a disease the vast majority of men suffer from, but I believe I may have found a cure, because today, in Total War Warhammer 3, we are cleansing the gene pool of people under 6 feet tall.
For tall people, or as we like to call them, biggers.
As a 5'11" vertically challenged person myself, this issue is near and dear to me, which is exactly why I've decided not to let future generations suffer a fate as terrible as my own. To conduct this precise and tactically demanding operation, I intend to use the help of disgruntled English football fans.
Fucking no!
I know what you're probably thinking. Wrestle, what does that have to do with short people? And to that I say, nothing in particular. I really just wanted to see what will happen if I told them the dwarf said that the British were in fact shit at the game and their only World Cup title came from a tournament on home soil with paid off judges. Yet to no one's surprise, they very quickly got on board with my height-based genocide. But can we achieve this tall order, or will the hordes of half-men stop us short in our tracks? Only one way to find out. We start off in Barak, already at war with the neighboring Greenskin faction, who disagree with our choice of football club and therefore want us to speedrun being a Russian journalist. However, our mud huts have neither staircases nor windows, making fulfillment of their request unfeasible. And since we can't put aside our differences, we are going to settle our little disagreement in a violent and chaotic manner by caving each other's skulls in. After finishing this battle with a kill-death ratio akin to a Viet Cong ambush and publicly lobotomizing the enemy faction leader, prompting his followers to uphold the universal law of real recognize real, we now have the option to confederate this greenskin tribe and make them fight under our banner. Very cool. While we're at it, I should talk about another core mechanic of the greenskins, this being the scrap upgrades. In a nutshell, after we win a battle, we gain a resource called scrap. This can be spent on various upgrades for our units, with stronger ones being locked behind research. In this case, we will install blinkers on our boars, which will in turn let us coordinate our cavalry formation with greater ease and subsequently double our charge bonus, because our overgrown pigs are no longer hitting each other on the way to a target. I digress. Our swift expansion brought us to the doorstep of Barak Varr, the first dwarven faction destined to be put 6 feet under for the unforgivable crime of being under 6 feet themselves. Unfortunately for them, as our immediate neighbors, they've drawn the short end of the stick, leaving them little time to prepare for our height supremacist onslaught. And even though I feel slightly sorry for them and would have liked to have given them a fighting chance, we're running a tight schedule here, so I have to get this over with quickly. But we have a slight problem. You see, All2Resolve believes that the outcome of this battle will be a close defeat with less than acceptable casualties. Our only option would be to starve them out, so they can crawl out of their holes and give us an easier time slaughtering them in some sort of a twisted game of whack-a-mole. And despite me going on about how we have no time to spare, I consider this preferable because they have Al-Qaeda fighters on their side, making the prospect of having IEDs thrown at us from atop the walls a very real thing. On the very next turn, my genius plan, consisting of waiting them out, was thrown out the window by the dwarfs not wanting to cooperate. I know, shocking. They seem to have decided to die fighting instead of perishing from lack of nourishment, which honestly isn't a bad thing. All it means is that I don't have to sit on my ass for multiple turns chanting discriminatory slurs in front of their walls. The battle was an absolute bloodbath. After all, these dwarfs are facing what amounted to a living natural disaster with vague traces of Mongol horde. But what really ground my gears was not their resolve to not get disemboweled and turned into midget stew to feed my armies. It was the fact that I couldn't win by having the longer battle line and staring at them menacingly. I was forced to do the unthinkable and actually micro my units. Although it was infuriating and demanded a level of brainpower I simply did not possess after finishing my 8-hour workday as a glorified typist, but being a glass half full kind of person, I took the opportunity to practice a popular maneuver. It involves spinning the enemy down at the front with some sturdy units, while the cavalry rolls in from behind to deliver some devastating backshots. People refer to it as hammer and anvil. I, however, prefer calling it the casting couch. Having delivered this monumental blow to the dwarves, they attempted to broker peace by bribing me, but all they could come up with was $38 and a chewed piece of gum. Naturally, I refused and went on to collect their scalps. This meant that we've crossed out the first faction from our laundry list of people we have to violently murder. In the meantime, Gorbat reached level 7. This meant that he's now acquired the knowledge to mount a boar, at this time not in any way related to procreation. Upon reaching the second shortest I've marked for extermination, I was met with the news that Skarsnik from the Crooked Moon was also attempting to make them cease exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide. This meant that we were currently tag teaming High King Thorgrim, who understandably was fucking furious at the sight of my armies waiting at his gates. Unfortunately, when I gave the order to attack, I realized that we were horribly outmatched by the garrison of Karaz-a-Karak. Their professional force, made up of highly trained and motivated soldiers, was vastly superior to my ragtag band of unwashed half-wits. What we had going for us, however, was numbers. So I decided to use mass assault tactics to drown the dwarven capital in a sea of green. This basically guaranteed that most of my soldiers were going to perish in this battle, but their deaths were a sacrifice I was willing to make. The fight for the walls was particularly brutal. My biggins managed to break through the gates and went straight to massacring the enemy crossbowmen. Meanwhile, Gorbat was single-handedly holding off 2 units of dwarf warriors while we popped a couple of brain busters on top of them. During all of this, I managed to sneak my squeakherds into the city, causing chaos within the dwarven ranks and capturing some victory points. In the end, it was our cavalry incursion that secured us the Pyrrhic victory. Now, losing his capital city may have weakened Thorgrim considerably. As you can see, he is currently strength rank 74, but don't let that fool you, we are now ranked 87. Those more intellectually astute of you will have assessed this situation as bad, perhaps very bad even. And now that Ungrim Ironfist has also declared war on us during my little tangent, I wouldn't blame you if you've determined this to be a textbook example of a dumpster fire. But don't worry. The orcs have a built-in get out of jail free card, known as a call to war. Pressing this big red button will single-handedly double our standing forces and save our skins from the wrath of Thorgrim, who is indeed very pissed off by the fact that he lost his house to foreign squatters. But before we can harness the power of the war, we need to dedicate it to either Gork or Mork. The gods of cunning brutality and brutal cunning, or was it the opposite? Whatever, just pick whichever one you like, they give small bonuses anyways. When I saw Thorgrim the next turn, I got a forced march induced erection, but the game decided to give me blue balls by cutting my movement range short, which meant I couldn't utilize the AI's incompetence to my advantage, and when he saw my now 4 armies approaching him, the High King decided to put the pedal to the metal on his midget-propelled chair and run for the hills, making the Pillars of Grungni a free piece of real estate. And with Mount's Quickhorn's 800 pipsqueak defenders reduced to paste, Mr. Hiking was forced into the unwashed hobo experience, slowly but surely inching to a death devoid of dignity, while watching us destroy and plunder his property. Great success. My premature victory dance was cut short the very next morning, when I woke up to desperate Papa Thorgrim, who took the high place in an attempt to cling to life. But I wasn't having any of this nonsense, so I went there to negotiate the terms of his surrender using my rather large axe. The battle began with him forming his forces into a double echelon formation and me flexing on him with my longer battle line. I was a little concerned to face his elite guard of longbeards, as I didn't really have anything that could go toe to toe with them. So I came up with the brilliant idea of throwing microwave-sized rocks at them. I was getting a bit bored looking at the slugfest that ensued between the dwarf warriors and my orcs, so I decided to drop the closest thing to a thermonuclear bomb that I have at my disposal, namely the Foot of Gork. After beating the Dwarf King into a bloody pulp, I sent the jar to deal with the last remnants of resistance, marking the end of yet another offender on our naughty list. Since our common enemy had been neutralized, I decided to thank Skarsnik with some new home decoration by mounting his head on a spike in front of his porch. And with that we confederated the crooked moon, adding to the girth of our ever-expanding waistline. We also reached this moment in the game when our military might is significant enough to warrant extortion money from random people we've never met, like this man-sized sewer rat who we shouldn't trust even for a single moment, but for now we'll agree to his terms on the condition that if he dares attack us, I will pull a Dio Brando on him and start a generational beef with his bloodline. Then came the news. Some mystery player had wiped Jufbar off the map. My first reaction was joy, one less half-man faction to worry about. But then it hit me. Someone else had stolen my kill. This turned into an ethical conundrum, where I debated with myself whether or not I was truly doing this for the benefit of humanity, or was I just another bitter short king, projecting his insecurities onto the world. It all seemed like I was having a former fat chick moment, you know, the one where a once fat woman loses weight and starts making fun of fatties, even though she herself had a phobia of harpoons until recently.
People ask me all the time, when is gonna be that cake video? Well, it's right now.
Was I perpetuating the cycle of height-based trauma? Yeah, I believe that's exactly what's happening. Over the next couple of turns, all I did was chase Ungrim until I finally caught up to him, tore his arms off and beat him with them. Yeah, dealing with the pint-sized ginger was rather easy and anticlimactic. I went ballistic on his settlements and he couldn't put up much of a fight. In the meantime, I signed a cheeky non-aggression pact with Clan Morse to secure my southern flank and recruited another army to aid the war effort. Evidently, the game must have heard my pleas for a smidge of fun and sent my way this obese sex criminal. The first battle caught me off guard because it was a garrison auto-resolve, which I didn't expect, but I guess God decided to give me some loop for my ass cheeks, because it gave me the time to assemble a force to respond to the ogres. At this point, my monetary situation was not looking too hot, but I couldn't do much about it as I had to pour every single cent I had to repel the fatties. Naturally, when faced with the prospect of declaring bankruptcy, I got slightly concerned. But I put my mind to work and came up with a solution which involved turning the ogres into mystery meat, which I would then sell to sausage makers in the Empire and recuperate some of the cost of my western campaign. I then besieged Karak-Kadrin and auto-resolved my way into victory. The only remaining army Ungrim had consisted of these two homeless guys who made a banzai charge and sealed the fate of their clan. Now, being able to divert my attention to Skrak, I sent the Ogre control force to take Akendorf and turn its garrison into Bratwurst. My joy did not last long because he immediately encircled Barak Varr, and in spite of my best efforts and the heavy losses we inflicted, the city fell into Skrak's greasy hands. Once this fiasco had concluded, I met him on the battlefield. As always, the game's prediction was not on our side, but what we did have was the high ground. You see, ogres are one-trick ponies. Great charge, terrible in sustained combat, and absolutely hopeless against a slight incline. On top of that, my army consisted mostly of orc boys Biggins, which, as their description suggests, are bigger and harder, thus giving us a chance to do unspeakable things to them before they do them to us. Things were going smoothly until their Stonehorn started tearing my army a new one. With practically no way for me to respond, I decided to deal with it by throwing people at the problem. During this time, I also discovered that my river trolls were in fact Pakistani immigrants from South London, so I sent them to give Skrak some directions as he seemed to have lost his way. Eventually, after sending everything I had towards the Stonehorn and shooting it point-blank execution style with the ballista, the beast fell and gave us a Pyrrhic victory. A little while later, the disciples of Hashut showed up at my eastern border. If you are wondering why they look a bit weird in comparison to the standard dwarfs we've been massacring, it is because they have severe daddy issues and listen to alternative rock, hence why they are dressed in a manner fitting a cannibal cult from Timbuktu. They also have a habit of placing forcefully volunteered laborers into their bow crushing factories, where the laborers in question get their bows crushed for 16 hours a day. Seeing these next victims of mine, I decided it was high time I fought Gorbat's quest battle that was being continuously put off until I could be bothered to deal with it. All we had to do was kill some beastmen and fight a detachment of the North Vietnamese army, which might sound easy until you realize you are hopelessly outnumbered and a significant portion of the Wu Tao forces is missile units while you have none of your own to shoot back with. You get so angry and spiteful that you buff Gorbat's melee attack to 143, so he can not only inflict physical damage, but strike their spirits as they leave their bodies for the afterlife, so you can get back at these annoying knife-eared shitlings. Anywho, we won the battle and unlocked Morgwar the Mangler, which turns Gorbat into a testosterone-fueled sex machine, capable of eviscerating any foe with a single swing of his mighty axe. Truly a weapon to surpass Metal Gear. On turn 35, I declared war on the Chaos Dwarfs and besieged the desolation of Drakkenmoor, where I once again used my trademark tactic of lobbing enormous stones into ironclad midgets and took the settlement. Following this, I signed a peace treaty with Skrak, who also offered to pay me an extortionate amount of money to remove my foot from his throat. I'm guessing that his generosity was inspired by me being strength rank 1 and him also being strength rank 1, with another 1 and a 3 after that. Moving on to the Blasted Expanse, where we faced our first real battle against the disciples of Hashut, we found out that some of our goblin brethren had also become disillusioned with the ongoing vertically motivated Holocaust and decided to join the ranks of the Edgy Shorts. This incurred the wrath of Gork, and his brutal cunningness made them taste his foot. This bloody affair cost us virtually all of our squeak cavalry, but when you take a look at the enemy losses equating to a cool 100% of their troops, I say it was a fair trade. By now I was experiencing some battle fatigue from the constant bashing of miniature skulls, so I took a strategic timeout and spent a good 45 minutes scratching my gentleman's area, building up settlements and cosplaying as Opera. Once things had cooled down, I took the opportunity to conduct a series of relentless strikes against the dwarfs, with multiple settlements falling under my control, only being interrupted by a quick non-aggression pact with Grimgor, who was also contributing to the sub-6-footer extermination process by fighting the warhost of Varr. The only minor inconvenience I faced was chasing around this Chaos Dwarf army, which decided to complete a sequence of bitch moves, namely sacking my towns and not standing still while I attempt to butterfly them like shrimp. It was around this time that I remembered Clan Angrund was still a thing, and I had two armies sitting next to them waiting for my two brain cells to resume communication and tell my body to click the button labeled Declare War. Sadly, Clan Morse noticed the opening of my second front and instantly declared war on me. Normally I wouldn't be too worried about it, as we've easily dispatched any and all foe we've encountered this game, but Quick is sitting at rank 5, which is causing me a significant amount of mental distress. While going through Gorbat's stats, I noticed an interesting development. Due to the prolonged exposure to chaos corruption in the godforsaken wastelands the dwarfs call home, he had picked up the Certifiable trait, which places a considerable debuff on his melee defense, but that's not actually a bad thing. All that means is that Gorbat has been freed from the chains of self-preservation, turning every duel he fights into a reenactment of Don Fry vs Yoshihiro Takayama. Following this life-altering discovery of mine, we got dragged into our first Subterranean interception battle. As if it wasn't bad enough that a large portion of the units I'm fielding are cavalry and flanking is impossible on such narrow maps, Belegar had to be a dick and bring an army comprised of 90% Iron Drakes, who are more than capable of turning my orcs into an unsettlingly green fondue. I lined up best as I could, placing my weaker units at the front, betting that my only option is to use them as cannon, or in this case flamethrower fodder, to waste their ammo and close the gap with my big guns and throws. This resulted in limited success, regrettably costing us the battle, but crucially not the war. Because just a single turn later, we faced off against Belegar once more, but this time things were looking a little different. You see, both he and my reinforcements were coming from the same spot at the same time, meaning that he will be devoid of the range advantage presented by the Iron Drakes, and my orc boys will be able to get close and personal. I engaged his first army, chipping away at them with my artillery, and quickly understood the graveness of my mistake of not sending extra units to the reinforcement zone to aid my other army. Although I shot myself in the foot with this blunder, and the game was trying to gaslight me into thinking that 750 is less than 62, the outcome was favorable to us. I then came knocking on Mr. Beard Armor for the third and final time, achieving my goal of yeeting him into the void. Seeing as we had just failed our way into victory on multiple occasions, it had started to look as if fate was on our side, further strengthening my resolve to complete my noble mission. And just as the high of victory was wearing off, I had another brainwave. What I was doing was not senselessly murdering tens of thousands of people, By killing every short person in the world of Warhammer, I was instead practicing eugenics, just on a much grander scale and with slightly unorthodox methods. Indeed, disposing of the midget race meant I was permanently altering the human genome by removing any possibility of reproduction with insufficiently tall specimen. While I was still riding my wave of delusion, I was also testing if Astrogot Ironhand was allergic to nuts, by kicking his down his throat. There was also the threat of Clan Morse, who at this point had ravaged the countryside and have now besieged Akendorf. Given that the auto-resolve's accuracy rivals that of a cross-eyed stormtrooper with Parkinson's, I opted to take matters into my own hands. I let the towers do their thing and thin out the approaching hordes. When their warfire throwers got in range of the walls, I pulled a 300 IQ maneuver and sallied out with my trolls to attack the rats trying to ram the gate open. This took advantage of the Skaven's blatant disregard for their own and created havoc by forcing them to shoot at us from behind their infantry, killing them in the process. Afterwards, I used the trolls to charge into the warfire throwers and beat the living shit out of them. My proactive approach seemed to be tilting the scales in our favor, and slowly but surely we were overpowering them. In the end, we won the siege after some fierce street fighting. Amidst the chaos in Akendorf, I clapped some more Clan Angrund cheeks, which ended up being the final nail in the coffin for them. As if the game had determined that the defeat of Clan Angrund warranted a new opponent, Arbao visited my house in the early hours and explained to me in great detail that he would like to harvest my spine. Shortly afterwards, I succeeded in securing peace with Clan Morse, as Queek seemed to have grown tired of me strangling his henchmen with their own guts. This put an end to this unforeseen distraction, and I was now able to divert further resources towards our main goal. By now, the disciples of Hashut had been reduced to a single settlement and everything seemed to be coming together, save for Arbao, who was being a nuisance. I even managed to win an Olympic medal in mental gymnastics by selling off this settlement to Wissenland, convincing them to sign a non-aggression pact to both completely secure my western flank, as I had signed one with Clan Skryar prior to this, and confederated Ajak without inheriting his war with them, which not only increased the size of my empire, but I also made him content with Skarsnik, who was fresh off his stint as garden decor, for the spot of my bottom bitch. But it was not all sunshine and rainbows. Trok, who controlled most of Norska and posed a sizable threat to us, expressed his acute dislike of my face. A crushing criticism from one so handsome. Over the next few turns, I finished off Astrogot, giving us some breathing room to fend off Throk, and I sent both Ajak and Skarsnik to begin my campaign against the servants of the Conclave, with the goal of taking Jar Nagrund, the symbolic capital of the Chaos Dwarfs, which will surely be detrimental to their fighting spirit. I also found myself looking at the very real possibility of being involuntarily involved in a foursome with Trog and his friends, so I had Gorbat retreat towards Karaz-a-Karak. Bit after that, I found myself in a choke point battle reminiscent of Thermopylae, only I was not nearly as outnumbered, I did not possess a force of highly disciplined Spartans, and I was able to acquaint the two Norscan armies with the business end of Gork's foot. And since I possessed a memory rivaling that of Hirohiko Araki, 65 turns into the game, I recalled finding a legendary item capable of summoning a tier 5 rogue idol. Unsurprisingly, my shaman ended the battle with 400 kills and 6300 gold value. My now main source of problems, Throk, chose to continue the streak of violence that day, and while the idea of watching Gorbat turned him into a before and after demonstration of the Flexio product line was tempting, my monkey brain demanded the instant dopamine hit of auto-resolve numbers, and I could not resist the temptation. I should mention that while all of these bloodbaths were taking place, I also sent my scouts into uncharted territory to seek more dwarfs. They bravely undertook this Herculean task as if they were Kerbos boarding the shitfuck 24 right after the shitfuck 23 burst into flames with no design changes being made. I will spoil the results of this expedition and inform you that the only two remaining were the servants of the Conclave and Drazoat the Ashen, whose faction name I can never remember. Ajak, who spent some time throwing the local economy into a recession by stealing everything in sight, was now marching towards the Falls of Doom, where I tested out the new weapon system I procured. You see, my current strategy of throwing large boulders at people was effective, but was lacking in efficiency due to the low accuracy. The solution? Make a homing projectile by strapping bat wings to a goblin and yeet it into the enemy front line. Not sure if our advancements in artillery design compelled the dwarfs to send a second army full of late game units as a response, but they seem to have labeled our appearance as an extinction level threat to their society. They were not wrong. Soon they met our invasion force in a struggle to retake the settlement. My primary concern was their fireglaves, who posed a real challenge with their top tier missile attack and decent melee capabilities. Taking this into account, I decided to do the only logical thing and create a new box around my artillery to try and take them out from afar. This garnered limited success as I forgot about the Chaos Dwarf's idiotic faction ability to fire the Schwerer Gustav at us. Nearly one-shotting units on the other side of its barrel. In retrospect, I probably should have charged them head-on instead of wasting such a huge chunk of models, but my 2020 hindsight is only usable after the fact, so there's that. In the end, I won by spamming Spirit Leech on their heroes like a complete cuck. This paved the way for me to capture Jar Nagrund, though I did make a stop to casually raid them for 2000 golds per turn. Concurrently, I was also wiping the floor with the Norscan armies, so much so that Trog dropped 66 places in the strength ranking, prompting him to accept the olive branch I extended to him. Much to my annoyance, this did not free up the northern front, because immediately afterwards, Daniel declared war on me. But I had a solution. I sold all of the settlements I took back to Trog right as I exited their vicinity, completely cucking out Daniel in the process. His bows were no longer blue from the coat alone. The finishing line was closer than ever, as I had just captured their capital and the last town followed suit. Drazoat was now the only living representative of the dwarf kind, and our job of unaliving him was made easier by Tretch, who was already exchanging blows with him. I quickly took to the Black Fortress and chased off Drazoat towards his last possession, while yelling at him to stop resisting because he was in fact being saved. Rather characteristically, I prematurely celebrated my victory once again, only to discover that there was a rebel army belonging to some no-name dwarf faction that previously lived in the town occupied by him. My face-off against the last Great Short went about as expected, with my units completely overrunning his force and Ajak meticulously crafting a drinking cup from his severed head. You might be thinking that I should have given him the courtesy of a fighting chance and that sending 7200 orcs against just over 2000 dwarfs was an excessive show of force. And you would be half correct. The massive disparity in our hosts was rather unnecessary, but I could never risk letting this tiny bastard slip between my fingers and threaten my wife's work by prolonging his existence. Finally, I sent Skarsnik to clean up this vast mess, and with that, ladies and gentlemen, we've completed our program of aggressive height enhancement and saved future generations from not being able to reach the top shelf. I wanna thank you all for witnessing my weaponized autism in action. That's it for this video, thank you all for watching.